Hey everyone, Eric Dutram here with the latest edition of the Dutram Report, the podcast on ETFs and more. Today we have with us Brad Loncar, CEO of Loncar Investments. We talk about the world of immunotherapy, biotechnology ETFs, and some of the most promising cancer research going on today. Tune in for that right after this. Brad, thanks for joining us.
It's a pleasure to be here. Thanks for having me.
So maybe first off, we can start off with what is immunotherapy? I know it's a specific area of this biotech world, but I think there's a lot of people out there who don't really know what it is. So maybe we can sort of enlighten them first off.
Yes, thank you. So I think everybody out there is probably familiar with chemotherapy, which in many cases is toxic and can affect the whole body. Well, the immune system is natural. It can adapt and learn. And so the theory is if you can harness it to fight a disease like cancer, you might see stronger and longer lasting results. And this is here now. The first generation of these drugs are approved in 5 or 6 different types of cancers already, and they're mostly being commercialized by big companies like Bristol Myers Squibb and Merck. And then you have a whole groundswell of what we traditionally think of as biotech companies working on second and third generation immunotherapies. And another key point is you hear that word immunotherapy a lot, but immunotherapy is not one thing. There's dozens of different approaches, some of which, as I mentioned, are here now today, and some are in development, and hopefully we'll see those come to market and help patients in the coming years.
So why do you think this is really taking off for cancer treatment right now? Do you think there's just a groundswell of new activity in the space, or technology's just caught up, or kind of a combination of multiple factors?
Yeah, the important thing is this is a new advance and a completely new way of thinking about treating the disease. And President Nixon actually declared war on cancer in 1971, and for a lot of different types of cancers, advances have been incremental. So one drug might come out and extend patients' lives for a few months, and maybe the next one would come out and it would be a few months more. And over a long period of time, that added up to a lot. But while it was happening, it felt very incremental. And many of these immunotherapies, at least in early studies, are not incremental. They're big advances. And another reason why it's so important is because these can potentially be used in combination with other things. So, for example, if you have a drug that you know works via another mechanism, if you can just get the immune system to kind of kick in and help out, you would think that that would be helpful. And so these can be very foundational. They can be used in many different types of cancers and in combinations with other immunotherapies and other drugs. And so there's just a lot of potential if these are developed right and turn out to be as promising as we hope they'll be.
Let's maybe take a minute to talk about the index you created to track this market, the Loncar Cancer Immunotherapy Index. First off, why create the index to track the space? Do you think it was sort of filling a void in the overall biotech world, or what was behind the push?
Well, I think we come in a middle ground. The analogy that I like to use is technology. I don't know about you, but 20 years ago, I thought of technology as one thing. And you had the NASDAQ 100 index and the triple Qs that followed it. And felt like if you had exposure to that, you felt like you owned technology. And what's happened in the 20 years since then is people don't think of tech that way anymore. They think of the individual businesses that make it up, like semiconductors and software and telecom equipment. Those are all different things. Some of them are high innovation and high growth, and some of them are low innovation and low growth. And they have different multiples, and different investors focus on them specifically. And so their own unique thing now. And the reality of biotech is the same. Sadly, I think people think of biotech today like they thought of technology 20 years ago. They view it as one grab bag called biotech. And the reality is there's high innovation areas of biotech and low innovation areas of biotech. And I think that immunotherapy is the most high innovation, promising thing going on right now in the sector that has the most potential to really make a difference, not only just in cancer, but in healthcare and society. And It's also a long-term trend. Drug development takes a long time, and even though the first round of drugs are here today, this is something that is going to play out over a long period of time. And in terms of what's out there now, if you were interested in it, you really only had two options before I created this. So first of all, you could look at individual biotech stocks, which takes a lot of research and know-how and also is very risky. And on the opposite end of the spectrum, you do have broad biotech indices, but those include everything, and they can be confusing. There's been a lot of negative headlines in the news lately. People see things and wonder, is Valent a biotech company? And the answer is they're not. They do almost no R&D, but there are some companies like that are in those areas, like Mylan. Mylan's a generic drug company and is not innovative at all. And if you're interested in this innovative area and you're looking at the big indices, you're 80 to 90% of what you're looking at is not what you're interested in. And so we're kind of in the middle. We focus on this specific area, but we do it in a way that includes a large basket of companies and also has exposure to all of the different immunotherapy approaches specifically, because as I mentioned before, immunotherapy is not one thing, and there's dozens of different approaches. And so my index covers them all.
Yeah, and you know what? We'll get to sort of the breakdown in a second. I did want to ask you, while we're sort of on the subject of the headlines in the news, are you concerned at all about the political environment for healthcare biotech? It seems like the sector's really taken a beating from a political perspective here over the last couple months.
Yeah, definitely. I think a lot of people have been on the sidelines for most of the year while this campaign is going on. And hopefully, once it passes, maybe things will return a little bit to normal. The things that you've seen in the news, I think, truly are outrageous. There are companies that have taken advantage of our healthcare system in our country, and I think there are things that should be done about that. But it's important to make a distinction between those types of things, like companies raising the prices on very old drugs, and innovators that are trying to develop new things that benefit society. And I think, or at least I hope, what might happen is during the campaign season, the political rhetoric is kind of off the charts, and people say just about anything. But I think when you get down to the nitty-gritty of actually creating legislation that's going to have an impact on an important industry like this, I think that legislators and just the general public are starting to make that distinction between companies that are doing bad things and innovators that are trying to do good things. And there's ways that we can reform the system by taking care of the first part without hurting the second part. And I hope that's eventually what will happen. And if it appears we're going in that direction, that would certainly be a positive for the whole sector.
Yeah. And you know what? Maybe we could talk a little bit about some of these innovators. I know they make up the majority of your index. Do you have a couple examples of some small cap companies in the index that are doing some groundbreaking work?
Yeah, one technology that people are very excited about, although like anything else, there's a healthy bull-bear argument, is something that's called CAR-T. And some of the tickers for that are Kite, so Kite Pharma, which is in Los Angeles, Juno Therapeutics, ticker is Juno, which is in Seattle, and another one is Cellectis, CLLS, which is in Paris. And these companies have a very interesting approach to this. So this is something that's working very well, at least initially, in some types of blood cancers. What these companies are able to do is you draw a patient's blood, and then they're able to essentially reprogram their T cells, which are the main attack cells of the immune system, and tell those T cells what to look for in the body. The term I like to use in layman's terms is it's kind of like attaching a GPS device to those T cells. And on a lot of blood cancers, there's a protein marker called CD19. So those companies program those cells to look for CD19 and to attack it. And so they do that and then infuse the cells back into the patient's body. And in some types of blood cancers, the initial results have been pretty amazing. So, for example, for ethical reasons, whenever you develop something that's experimental and completely new, you always test it first in patients who sadly have failed all other known treatments and are untreatable. And in that type of patient population, in a type of leukemia called ALL, when they do that procedure that I talked about, reprogramming T cells, these companies have seen initially like a 90% complete remission rate, which is amazing. As a biotech investor, I've never seen anything like that before. And some of the patients do end up relapsing, but in terms of a starting point, then what they may be able to do with that type of technology and how they can harness it one day, it's a very promising starting point. And it's possible that that might be on the market as soon as late next year or early 2018. The first company to kind of have a final trial is Kite. They just announced some data a few weeks ago, and it was a kind of a volatile stock because of that news announcement. And they may file approval for that type of approach by the end of this year, and it could be reviewed and approved as early as late next year. So that's one that people are excited about. And then one more is called checkpoint inhibitors. That's really the biggest piece of immunotherapy, and that's actually the larger companies that are focused on that, like Bristol and Merck, and those have already been approved in 6 unique different types of cancers. Melanoma, which they've revolutionized the treatment of, lung cancer, kidney cancer, bladder cancer, head and neck cancer, and a type of blood cancer called Hodgkin's lymphoma. And those will be foundational. Those will be used in dozens of different types of cancers, and those are the ones that can be used in combination with other things. So that's another area, checkpoints, that people are very excited about right now.
Yeah, no, you mentioned some of the large cap companies. I noticed that these make up about 1/4 of the index, and you got companies such as Amgen, Merck, AstraZeneca. Obviously, these companies aren't solely focused on immunotherapy. So I guess maybe you could get some background as to why you'd include these in the index.
Sure, for 2 reasons. Number one, they're the leaders that have the drugs on the market today. So it would not be a credible immunotherapy index if they were not included somehow. And you'd be surprised at how much money and therefore how much it impacts this specific area impacts these stocks. So for example, a month ago, you might have seen Bristol Myers had a very turbulent move. They had a lung cancer trial fail for one of their immunotherapy drugs, and the stock is down over $40 billion since that trial failed, which is amazing because you think of Bristol as a big diversified company, but the reality of that stock for the last 3 or 4 years and the reality going forward for the next 3 or 4 years is almost the lone reason why people are trading that stock is their immunotherapy drug, Opdivo. And this lung cancer trial that they failed in is amazingly is just one subset of patients. They've already been approved in what we call third-line non-small cell lung cancer and second-line, and they had a trial in the first line of patients that failed in the same area that Merck's immunotherapy drug already succeeded. And so you think of this as like a big multi-billion-dollar company, but they had one trial in one subset of one type of cancer cause a $40 billion move in that stock. And so even though they're big companies, they're trading because of this specifically. So the way we've designed this index, we have 30 companies total, and 7 of them are those large companies like Merck and Bristol. And you're right, they make up about 1/5 to 1/4 of this, and 23 of them are what you more classically think of as pure play biotech companies that are developing the 2nd and 3rd generation immunotherapies.
Yeah, and you know what? I think that's a really good point that you bring up about some of these large cap companies trading on immunotherapy issues, and that makes perfect sense why they'd be included. Overall, I think this has been really informative, and really appreciate you coming on to talk about your index and this exciting area of the biotech world. I did want to note, as kind of the last question here, I saw that Loncar Investments is going to be kind of doing a donation to Cancer Research Institute. I don't know if you can talk about that a little more.
For sure. Thank you for asking about it. So I have a partnership. Right now it's a 2-year partnership with a charity in New York called the Cancer Research Institute. And believe it or not, they've been solely focused on this area of immunotherapy since the 1950s. And that just goes to show how long this stuff is being developed. A lot of people are learning about it for the first time because the first drugs are just making it to the market today. But the reason why these drugs are here today and helping patients is because people like Cancer Research Institute invested in what we call the basic research decades ago. This is testing things in petri dishes and test tubes long before you get to animal and certainly human stage. And so I have a partnership with them where I'm donating a portion of my index royalties to them. And the idea is we kind of feel like we support the public companies that are delivering these drugs to patients today, and we want to recycle some of that goodwill into those charities that are doing the basic research so that we have breakthroughs of tomorrow. So it's been really nice to work with them and get to know them, and it's something that I'm very proud of. They're a great organization, and their website is cancerresearch.org, and that's just a great place to learn about immunotherapy in general. A lot of times people ask me if there's, is there an immunotherapy for pancreatic cancer or something? That's the website you want to go to, and they have a patient hotline with professionals that can answer questions like that and tell you about clinical trials. And so cancerresearch.org is a great resource, and that's a great charity.
Yeah, this is something I usually don't see out of a lot of index providers, so it seems great that you're one of the few out there doing this. It seems like a good charity to look at, and we'll definitely check that site out. All right, thanks, Brad, for joining us. This was great, and best of luck with the index.
Thanks a lot. It's my pleasure. Thanks for having me.
All right, everyone. That was Brad Loncar, the CEO of Loncar Investments. His index is the Loncar Cancer Immunotherapy Index, and it is the underlying benchmark for the Loncar Cancer Immunotherapy ETF, ticker CNCR. And the charity mentioned was the Cancer Research Institute, and their site is cancerresearch.org. Well, hope you enjoyed this edition of the Dutram Report. Make sure to tune in for more interviews and discussions on the world of exchange-traded funds in the future. And for my thoughts on the ETF world, make sure to go over to Zacks.com and check out the ETF Investor Service, which includes my top picks and commentary on the markets. Until next time, for Zacks.com, I'm Eric Dutram.